This is my current daily driver. It's a 1997 Renault Trafic 2.2 petrol, originally a minibus but now just a window van. I've had it for just over 3 years now, and although the bodywork is showing its age, mechanically it's been pretty good. There are a few things that need sorting though. The engine has a fairly significant oil leak. I think it's mainly coming from the distributor seals, but I'm not 100% sure on that. The coolant level also drops over time. I think this stems from a split hose, but again I'd have to have a closer look to be sure. But with my free time very much limited, I'm actually going to prioritise a couple of jobs which I've wanted to tackle for a while now. Electric windows and central locking. Whilst I do enjoy the extra precision and superior reliability manual windows offer, the one thing that's always bugged me is the inability to operate the passenger side as a single occupant. I guess there's some argument for only doing the passenger window, but, well, that just seems silly to me. And I don't think anyone needs persuading of the merits of central locking, so as this intro's already far too long, let's get on with some actual work. So it makes sense to have a look at the central locking system at the same time as the windows, and the first bit I'm going to have a look at is the passenger door. The door furniture here is pretty simple. A series of screws and trim clips hold everything on. What you won't find are any one-use clips or hidden fixings. In contrast to modern vehicles, this is refreshingly easy. Having done this several times now on my other vans, I've found with the handle discussion that it's easier to just leave it in place and rotate the door card around it. This speaker never did sound any good. I guess I know why now. This plastic film helps keep the rainwater out, and it actually does a surprisingly good job. The mastic, on the other hand, is horrible. I mean, it does a fantastic job of sealing, but whatever you do, don't get it on your hands. I think that one's had it. I need to lower the window to around halfway so that the regulator arms are roughly level. This just makes it easier to see the rollers later on. With the regulator now undone, I need to push it away from me to free the 4 studs. A sharp pull to the left then disengages the rollers from the window channel. Now the runner felts on this are quite stiff, so to keep the window up out of the way, all I need to do is push the glass up as far as it will go, and friction will hold it for me. If it was any freer though, then I would have to chock it. To be honest, I'd probably recommend chocking it anyway, just to be safe. One of the quirks of these mechanisms is that they only clear the front channel in one position. By winding the handle, you can see the toothed gear now clears. It is still a bit tight, but the winder spindle is just short enough to clear the door frame. There's a side impact bar which runs along the centre here, so the regulator body has to remain above that in order to come out. Earlier models had an even longer spindle, which makes it much harder, but it is still possible on those without taking the whole door apart. Right, this is the new electric regulator, and it's actually easier to fit as of course there's no spindle sticking out. Right, I'm going to be a bit cheeky here and have a quick test just off a DeWalt battery. Looks good to me. Moving on now to the central locking, and what you see here is most of what I'll need to convert this van. Now, believe it or not, the Traffic did actually come with central locking as an optional extra from around 94 onwards. I've only ever seen one example with it fitted though, so clearly it wasn't a popular choice. From 1997 up until the end of production around the turn of the century, Opel, and of course Vauxhall here in the UK, offered a van called the Arena, which was pretty much identical to the Traffic. Think of it as the predecessor to the Vivaro. Oddly, they all came with central locking as standard, so actually your best chance of finding the original kit is from an Arena, which is exactly where this lot came from. So first to come off is the outer latch mechanism. This one's working fine, so it'll go back on afterwards. A couple of clips hold the rods in place on the inner handle. And with those off, the inner assembly can come out. I noticed the rear channel was looking decidedly crispy, so it makes sense to sort that while I've got everything apart. It's very common, the main cause is water ingress. The felt holds the water, so it just sits there rotting the steel away. This one might be salvageable, but if not, then I'll just dig out a better one. Side by side, you can see the Renault engineers essentially just added an extra bracket to hold the locking motor. It's not even a different pressing, they've literally just riveted on an extra bracket to the standard assembly. And I guess there's nothing wrong with that. The tricky bit here is lining the push button up with the hole in the outer handle. I'm just pulling on one of the rods here to make sure everything's lined up properly. I'll have to wait till later on to test the actual motor. So with the basics mounted in place, I need to wire it all up, and to gain access I'll remove the speaker. This one of course won't be going back on. The wiring is sent out to the doors through this rubber gaiter, and of course the only wires originally were for the speaker. But I've got several more to add now, and whilst I could modify this original loom, I think it'll be easier to start with one from the Arena. I need to push the large ceiling plug out, and this 3/8 extension should do the trick. These later looms have a multi-pin plug which makes it much easier to remove. On earlier models the wiring was continuous from the radio. As you can see, the Arena loom uses the same plug, which is very handy, and has the wiring for the locking motor already installed. So all I need to do is add a few extra wires for the window motor. But just how many depends on a few things. Now, one of the features I quite like to add to these is a one-touch feature, which is basically where you have to dab the switch rather than hold it down and it'll carry on itself. Most modern cars have this now, it's fairly common. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of these old Rover window modules. So a fairly common sort of early 2000s, late 90s. Most Rovers with electric windows had something similar to this. So all I've got to do now is work out the best place to mount it, and it's probably going to be in the door because that makes the wiring quite a bit simpler. I looked at a few places for this, but in the end settled for above the speaker. It's the most waterproof place for a start, but it also has good access for the wiring. Plus, the fixings can be hidden under the door card. I know it's inside, but a little wax oil on the bare steel can't hurt. And I'm using some countersunk machine screws here, which I'm hoping will pull into the steel and sit flush behind the door card. Back with the arena loom, and this moulded seal is a bit of a problem for me as there's no way of adding any extra wires through it. If you compare this to the original loom, you'll see that that one used a flat plastic plug, which may not be quite as good at sealing, but it is modifiable. I really do hate destroying things like this, but I couldn't see any alternative. These rubber seals were used on the very late models and were moulded around the wires, so you can't even pull the old ones through, let alone add any more. And after significant persuasion, it eventually releases its grip, and I managed to remove it without damage to the wires. And in order to slide the other plastic one on, I need to deepin the plugs. In total, I'll have 8 wires going through here, so I've gone for a 10mm hole, which should be just about right. To help stop them snagging, a piece of stiff sleeving should be ideal for routing them through the rubber gaiter. The sleeving isn't permanent, it's just a help at this stage. And the plug can then be repinned. Now I will of course fit a plug on the new wires as well, but I'm going to leave them long for now until I know exactly where it wants to go. And because of that, I'm going to fit the loom in reverse, so that means feeding it outwards from inside the van. The original wiring for the locking motor used a 2-pin round plug, which only just fits through the hole in the door. I'm not sure if the plugs on the new wires will do that though, so I'll fit those afterwards. It's important that the wiring for the locking motor doesn't interfere with the window, so Renault used a couple of these clips to hold it out the way. And that's the central locking done on this door. Back to the window, and I need to add this piece which connects the module with the new switch. And the wires for the motor need to be rerouted so they pop out by the module. And then it's the usual soldering, heat shrinking, and crimping that's required. The 2-pin plug on the module was easy to source, it's a pretty common Sumitomo connector. But the 6-pin one, wow, that was difficult. It's also a Sumitomo, but seemingly from a range that pretty much doesn't exist anymore. I eventually found some from a specialist automotive connector shop online. Right, with that done, I can start reassembling the door, and the first bit to go on is the rear channel. This is the original one. It wasn't actually too bad, and after sandblasting it came up pretty well. A couple of coats of zinc primer and some satin black and it's as good as new. I'm just testing it to make sure the one touch works properly and that the stop-start function is operating as it should. This is the switch pod which fits to the door card. It's held on with 4 screws, and the idea here is to position it over the old spindle hole to cover it up. The pod comes with this template which makes aligning everything much easier. I wasn't sure if a pen would work here, but yes, it does. Quite well actually. The only problem I found here was the foam padding under the vinyl tended to gum up the drill bit, so I had to keep clearing it after each one. And the pod just screws on from behind using these large-headed self-tappers. What I did here was to fit all 4 screws first and then lay the pod over, tightening each one a few turns each time. Right, time to reassemble the door. Right, that's this door done. So while I've got the van this way round in the garage, I'm going to have a look at the lock on the side door next. But I think I'll leave that for the next video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. But I think that's going to be much harder than most of the other run, to be honest.